Welcome. The BoreCore archive is a collection of slow, methodical recordings of technical processes and perfectly boring routines designed to help you relax and fall asleep. New procedures are added regularly, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Time to relax, close your eyes, and take it on down to Sleepy Town.
Welcome to a complete operational guide to the documentation, cataloging, condition assessment, and inventory management of museum artifacts, or how to write extremely thorough notes about very old things. You are a museum curator. More specifically, you are a collections curator, which is the kind of curator who works primarily with objects rather than with the public, though you work with both, just in different proportions and with different levels of eye contact. The objects do not make eye contact. This is one of the things you appreciate about them. Your institution is a mid-sized regional museum with a general collection spanning decorative arts, natural history, archaeology, and local history. The collection contains approximately 47,000 registered objects. You have personally handled a meaningful fraction of these. You know where the rest of them are. Knowing where things are is a significant part of your job, which is also one of the reasons the job exists. The work you will do today is collections documentation and inventory. Documentation is the process of creating, maintaining, and updating the written and visual record of every object in the collection. Inventory is the process of physically verifying that objects are where the records say they are. These two activities are related in the way that a map and a territory are related. One describes the other, and the value of each depends on how accurately they correspond. Your job, in part, is to make sure the map and the territory agree. When they do not agree, you investigate. When they do agree, you note that they agree. Then you move to the next object. The word curator comes from the Latin curare, meaning to care for. You care for objects. You care for them in a very specific, documented, procedurally defined way that involves controlled environments, archival materials, standardized terminology, and a great deal of writing. The objects, for their part, are cared for without being aware of it, which is fine. Awareness is not required for care to be meaningful. This is true in museum work and also in several other contexts. You will work today in several areas of the museum: the collections storage area, the registration office, the conservation lab, and briefly, the gallery. Each area serves a different function in the life of an object in the collection. Storage is where most objects spend most of their time. Registration is where their records live. The conservation lab is where their physical condition is assessed and treated. The gallery is where a small fraction of them are seen by people who drove here on a Saturday. You will visit all of these today. You will bring a clipboard. Your shift begins at 8:30 in the morning. It will end, in principle, at 5 in the afternoon. In practice, it may end somewhat later, because documentation work has a quality of expanding to fill available time plus whatever additional time can be found. In the way that water finds its level, except the level is always slightly below where you currently are, and the water is paperwork. Let us begin. You arrive at the museum. The museum opens to the public at 10 a.m., but staff arrive earlier because the work of a museum happens largely before and after the public is present. The building is quiet in a way that it will not be once visitors arrive. The quiet of a museum in the morning before it opens is a particular kind of quiet. It has weight to it, which is the weight of the objects inside. You badge in through the staff entrance. You proceed to the collections wing, which is separated from the public galleries by a locked door. You unlock the door and enter. The temperature changes slightly as you cross the threshold. The collection's storage area is maintained at a lower temperature than the public spaces, for reasons we will discuss in detail shortly. You note the temperature on the wall-mounted thermometer hygrometer as you pass. 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 46% relative humidity. Both are within acceptable range. You note this in the daily environmental log hanging on the clipboard just inside the door. The log is a simple grid: date, time, temperature, humidity, your initials. You fill it in. You move on. You reach the registration office. The registration office is a small room containing several desks, a large flat file cabinet for storing paper records, and flat archival materials, 2 computer workstations, running the museum's collection management system, a flatbed scanner, a digital camera and copy stand, and a great number of binders and filing boxes arranged on shelves with labels that become more legible the closer you get to the items you are most frequently looking for. This is not an accident. This is the natural organization of a working office. You sit at your workstation. You open the collection management system. The collection management system, which your museum calls by the name of the software it uses, is the central database in which every object in the collection has a record. The record for each object contains its accession, number its title or object name, the date it entered the collection, its donor or source, its physical description, its measurements, its condition, its location in storage, or on display, its exhibition history, its loan history, its conservation history, its associated bibliography, and any other information that is relevant to understanding and managing the object. This is a lot of information. For 47,000 objects, it is a very large amount of information. The collection management system holds it. You use the collection management system every day. You are comfortable with the collection management system. You also have a list of things you wish the collection management system did differently, which you keep to yourself, because the software was purchased after a lengthy institutional committee process and will not be changed. You review the tasks queued for today. There are 3 primary tasks. The The first is the continued documentation of a group of 32 objects from a recent acquisition, a private collection of 19th century American decorative ceramics donated by the estate of a local collector. These objects arrived 3 weeks ago, were given temporary accession numbers upon receipt, and now require full cataloging, physical description, measurements, condition assessment, photography, and final accession number assignment. You have processed 14 of the 32 so far. Today, you will continue with the remaining 18. The second task is a partial inventory of storage room 3, the room housing the archaeological collection, which is scheduled for its annual verification this month. Inventory involves physically locating each object listed in the system as being in storage room 3 and confirming its presence, its condition, and the accuracy of its location record. Storage room 3 contains approximately 3,200 objects. You will not complete the entire inventory today. You will work through a portion of it systematically, as you have been doing for the past 2 weeks. The third task is reviewing and approving a set of condition reports completed by a collections intern for a group of objects being considered for an outgoing loan to a partnering institution. Condition reports must be reviewed and signed by a professional staff member before they can be sent to a borrowing institution. The intern has done good work. Your review will be a confirmation of their work and a check for completeness and correct terminology. This will take approximately 90 minutes. You pour yourself a cup of coffee from the small machine in the corner of the registration office. The coffee is adequate. You begin. Before you can document an object, you must understand what an accession number is and why it exists. An accession number is the unique identifier assigned to an object when it formally enters a museum's collection. It is the number that ties every piece of information about an object together. Its physical record, its digital record, its location, its history. Without the accession number, information about an object is an island. With the accession number, all information about an object is connected. This is the purpose of the accession number. It is not decorative. Accession numbers follow a system that varies from institution to institution. But the most common format in American museums is a 3-part number. The year of accession, a sequential accession group number for that year, and a sequential object number within that group. Written out, it looks like this: 2024, 714. This means the 14th object in the 7th accession group received by the museum in the year 2024. A different object might be 2024, 715. The one before it was 2024, 713. They arrived together. They will be documented and stored near each other. They will be connected in the record for as long as the record exists, which is intended to be indefinitely. Some museums use different formats. Some use a simple sequential number across all years. Some use letters. Some use a 4-digit year rather than a 2-digit year. Some have changed systems over their history and have objects with numbers from multiple eras, which creates a documentation challenge that the registrar has strong opinions about, and which is not your problem to solve today. Your museum uses the 3-part year group object format. You know this format the way you know your own name. The accession number is physically applied to each object in the collection in a way that is reversible, stable, and unlikely to damage the object. This is called marking, and it is one of the more practically complex aspects of collections care, because you must mark the object in a way that is permanent enough to stay on for decades, but impermanent enough to be removed without harming the object if necessary. The method of marking depends on the object's material. For objects with a stable non-porous surface, such as glazed ceramics, glass, or metal, the standard method is to apply a small barrier layer of a stable reversible adhesive, typically acrylate B72, dissolved in acetone. Allow it to dry. Then write the accession number over it in archival ink. Then apply a second layer of B72 over the ink to protect it. This creates a small, labeled patch on the object, typically on an inconspicuous location, such as the base, the back, or the interior. The patch is visible under ultraviolet light, even if the ink fades, because the B72 itself is UV fluorescent. This is a useful quality for porous materials such as unglazed ceramics, stone, or bone. The barrier layer is especially important because ink applied directly to a porous surface may be absorbed into the material and become impossible to remove without damage. The B72 barrier prevents this. For painted or decorated surfaces, the marking location is chosen to avoid any painted area. For textiles, a small archival fabric tag is stitched to an inconspicuous area using archival thread. For natural history specimens, the tag may be tied with archival thread or placed with the specimen in its container. For paper or works on paper, no direct marking is applied. The accession number is written on the folder, envelope, or housing that contains the object, not on the object itself. Paper is marked by its housing. This distinction matters. You will not be marking objects today because the objects you are working with already received their temporary numbers upon arrival. Today, you will assign final accession numbers and update the records. The physical marks have already been applied. Your work is in the record. You retrieve the next group of objects from the temporary holding area. The temporary holding area is a section of shelving in the registration room designated for objects that have arrived but have not yet been fully processed. Objects in temporary holding have temporary numbers and basic intake records, but are not yet part of the permanent collection record. They are, in a bureaucratic sense, in transition. They are in the museum, but not yet of the museum. This distinction is meaningful in collections management. You bring the first object to the documentation table. The documentation table is a large, padded work surface with good overhead lighting, a ruler built into one edge, and a neutral gray background for photography. You set the object down on a padded rest. The object is a transferware pitcher, American circa 1840 to 1860 earthenware, with a blue and white transfer printed decoration, depicting a pastoral landscape with a bridge, a river, and what appears to be a structure in the background that might be a mill, or might be a manor house, or might be a mill that resembles a manor house. The ambiguity of historical transfer printed decoration is something you have made peace with. You open a new cataloging record in the collection management system. You begin filling in the fields. Object name, pitcher. This is the object's name as a type. It is a pitcher. You know it is a pitcher because it has a handle, a spout, and a body designed to hold and pour liquid. These are the defining characteristics of a pitcher. If it had no spout, it would be a jug. If it had neither spout nor handle, it would be a vessel, which is a broader term that accommodates more ambiguity. The distinction matters for cataloging because the object name determines how the object can be found in a database search. A pitcher filed as a jug cannot be found when someone searches for pitchers. You enter pitcher, classification, ceramics, subclassification, earthenware, further subclassification, transfer printed earthenware. These classifications follow a controlled vocabulary, which is a standardized list of approved terms for describing objects. Your museum uses the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus, abbreviated AAT, as its controlled vocabulary for object types and materials. The AAT is a hierarchical vocabulary containing hundreds of thousands of terms organized into categories. Using a controlled vocabulary means that all curators at all institutions who use the same vocabulary will use the same word for the same thing, which means that records from different institutions can be searched and compared meaningfully. If one curator calls an object a pitcher, and another calls it a ewer, and a third calls it a jug, a search for pitchers returns only one of the three. If all three curators use the controlled vocabulary term, a search returns all three. Controlled vocabulary is the difference between a database and a collection of disconnected notes. You enter the controlled vocabulary terms. Title or descriptive title. You examine the decoration more carefully. Transfer printed decoration on American earthenware of this period often used named patterns, which were produced by engraving a design on a copper plate, applying ceramic pigment to the plate, transferring the pigment to a tissue paper, and then applying the tissue paper to the unfired ceramic body, burning away the paper in the kiln and leaving the design. patterns were often pastoral, often European in inspiration, and were given names by their manufacturers that were sometimes printed on the base of the object alongside the manufacturer's mark. You turn the picture over. On the base, you see a blue transfer printed back stamp. You examine it under magnification. It reads, "Beauties of America," with a decorative border. Below it, partially legible, what appears to be a manufacturer's mark in an eagle design with a banner. You photograph the back stamp separately from the overall object photographs. You note it in the record. The pattern name Beauties of America is a documented series produced by several American potteries in the mid-19th century, depicting American landmarks. You will research the specific scene and manufacturer after completing the initial physical description. You enter a provisional descriptive title. Picture, Beauties of America pattern, American, circa 1840-1860. This is a working title. It may be revised after research. Date, circa 1840-1860. The circa indicates that the date is approximate. The range of 20 years is reasonable for transfer printed earthenware of this type, in the absence of a more specific date on the object, or in the acquisition documentation. The donor's records for this piece do not specify a date beyond 19th century, which is correct, but not helpful for narrowing the range. The backstamp style and the pattern name may allow a narrower attribution after research. For now, circa 1840-1860. Culture or place of origin, American. You know it is American because the backstamp, despite being partially legible, is consistent with American pottery marks of the period, and because the pattern name Beauties of America is a specifically American series. If the pattern were English, which many transfer print patterns were, it would typically depict English landscapes and bear an English manufacturer's mark. American potteries of this period frequently imitated English transfer print techniques, but applied them to American subjects as a point of national distinction. Medium and materials. You look at the object carefully. The body of the pitcher is cream-colored where the glaze has chipped at the base rim, indicating an earthenware body rather than a stoneware or porcelain body. Earthenware is a low-fired, porous ceramic that requires a glaze to hold liquids. The glaze over the decoration is a clear lead or lead-free glaze, transparent, slightly glossy. The decoration is applied under the glaze, which protected it from wear, and is why it remains legible nearly 2 centuries later. You enter earthenware with transfer printed underglaze decoration. Measurements. You pick up your calipers and ruler. You measure the pitcher. Overall height, 22.3 centimeters. Width at widest point, handle to spout, 16.8 centimeters. Diameter at base, 9.1 centimeters. Diameter at rim, 9.5 centimeters. You enter all measurements in centimeters, as is standard practice, with 1 decimal place. Imperial measurements may be added as a secondary record, depending on your institution's practice, but the primary measurements are metric. Always metric. This is not a preference. This is a standard. Wait, you place the picture on the small scale on the documentation table. 512 grams. You enter this. Weight is not always recorded for ceramic objects, but it is useful for shipping and loan documentation, for insurance valuation, and for assessing whether an object is solid or hollow in ways that are not visually apparent. This picture is a picture. It is hollow. You knew that. You weigh it anyway. Every object in the collection has a condition record. The condition record describes the physical state of the object at a specific point in time. It is a baseline against which future condition assessments are compared, allowing the museum to detect and document any changes, new damage, active deterioration, past repairs that are failing over the life of the object in the collection. The condition record is not a repair record. It describes what is, not what was done about it. Conservation treatment records are separate. Condition assessment is done in a standardized vocabulary as well, because a subjective description of an object's condition is nearly useless for comparison. If one curator writes that an object is in good condition, and another writes that the same object 5 years later is in fair condition, it is not clear whether the object has deteriorated, or whether the two curators have different definitions of good and fair. Most museum systems use a defined condition scale: excellent, good, fair, poor, and critically poor, with consistent definitions for each level. Some institutions use A through E, some use numerical scales. Your institution uses excellent through critically poor, with written criteria for each designation. Excellent condition means the object is complete, stable, and shows no significant deterioration, damage, or loss. It may show minor signs of age appropriate to its type, and period that do not affect its integrity or legibility. Good condition means the object is complete and stable, with minor damage, wear, or loss that does not significantly affect the whole. Fair condition means the object has moderate damage, deterioration, or loss that is noticeable, but does not compromise the object's overall integrity. Poor condition means significant damage, loss, or active deterioration that affects the object's stability or legibility. Critically poor condition means severe and ongoing deterioration or damage that poses a risk of further loss or complete failure of the object if not immediately addressed. You examine the picture systematically, beginning at the top and working downward. You use a 10-power loop for close examination of the surface. You work in good raking light, which means light coming from the side at a low angle, because raking light reveals surface texture scratches, cracks, and repairs that are not visible in overhead light. You note what you see. The rim. There is a small chip on the inner rim edge, approximately 4 millimeters across and 2 millimeters deep. The chip exposes the cream-colored earthenware body. It is old. The exposed body at the chip site shows no sharp edges and is slightly worn, indicating the chip occurred sometime in the past rather than recently. There is no loose material at the chip site. The chip is stable. The spout intact. No chips, no cracks. The lip of the spout shows minor where consistent with use. A slight smoothing of the glaze at the very edge that indicates the pitcher was used, perhaps many times, to pour liquid. This kind of use, where is not damage. It is evidence of the object's history, which is part of what the object is. You note the use where, but do not classify it as damage. The handle, intact, firmly attached. You press gently on the handle at the join points where it meets the body, top and bottom. No movement, no sound, no evidence of a previous break and rejoin. The handle joins are tight. This is good. Handle joins are one of the most common failure points in ceramic vessels. Because the handle and the body, having been joined before firing, can separate along the join line over time through thermal stress, physical shock, or the gradual failure of a historical repair. The body, you rotate the pitcher slowly in the light. The transfer printed decoration is crisp and complete. No rubbing, no fading visible to the naked eye. The glazed surface is sound. No crazing, which is the network of fine cracks in the glaze that occurs when the glaze and the body expand and contract at different rates over time. Some crazing is common and expected in earthenware of this age. The absence of crazing here suggests either that the glaze was well matched to the body in terms of thermal expansion coefficient, or that the object has been stored in a stable environment, possibly both. The base, the accession mark is present and legible. The back stamp is intact. There are 3 small areas of glaze loss on the foot rim, consistent with the object having rested on a rough surface repeatedly over its lifetime. These are old losses, stable, not progressing. There is a faint brown stain in the interior of the base, possibly from water or from whatever liquid the pitcher last held approximately 200 years ago. The stain is not active. It is a record. Overall condition, good. The pitcher is complete, with 1 minor chip on the inner rim, 3 areas of glaze loss on the foot rim, and a stain in the base interior. All damage is old and stable. The object is structurally sound and fully legible. You enter this condition assessment in the record. You note the date of the assessment and your name. The condition is now documented. If anyone looks at this picture in 20 years and finds a new crack or a new chip, they will have this record to compare against. They will know when the crack was not there. You photograph the chip at the rim with a scale bar in the frame. You photograph the foot rim losses. You photograph the interior stain. These are the condition photographs, which are separate from the overall catalog photographs. They are stored in the image management system linked to the object record. The condition report and the photographs together form the complete condition record. Object photography for collection documentation is not artistic photography. It is informational photography. The goal is not to make the object look beautiful, though objects that are beautiful tend to look that way regardless. The goal is to record the object accurately and completely in a standardized way that allows the image to be used for identification, publication, exhibition, insurance, and comparison across time. Beauty is optional. Accuracy is not. The documentation table is set up for this. You have already placed the picture on the padded rest against the neutral gray background. The camera on the copy stand is positioned directly above for overhead shots and can be repositioned for angled and profile views. The lighting is provided by 2 daylight-balanced bulbs on adjustable arms, positioned to minimize harsh shadows, while providing enough raking light to show surface texture. The camera is set to record in RAW format rather than JPG. RAW files contain the complete, unprocessed data captured by the camera sensor, without any in-camera processing, compression, or color adjustment. They are larger files. They are also more accurate files. A JPEG is a processed, compressed approximation of what the camera saw. A RAW file is what the camera saw. For documentation purposes, you want what the camera saw. You photograph the picture in a standard sequence. First, a full face view, the main decorative face of the object, perpendicular to the camera, with the object centered in the frame and a gray scale card and ruler visible in the frame. The gray scale card is a small card with patches of known gray values from white to black, which allows any color management software to calibrate the image to the correct tonal values. The ruler provides scale. Every documentation photograph includes a ruler. A photograph without a ruler is a photograph of an object with no known size, which is less useful than it sounds, and considerably less useful than it should be. You photograph the front view. You rotate the picture 90 degrees and photograph the left side. 90 degrees more, the back. 90 degrees more, the right side. You photograph the base, setting the picture upside down on a padded ring so it rests safely and the base is fully visible. You photograph the interior through the mouth of the picture. 6 views minimum for a 3-dimensional ceramic object. More views as needed for complex decoration or significant condition issues. This picture has received 2 additional views, a detail of the transfer printed decoration on the main face and a detail of the back stamp on the base. You transfer the photographs to the image management station and review them. You are checking correct exposure, correct white balance, sharpness through the plane of focus, absence of unwanted reflections on the glazed surface, scale bar in frame, gray card in frame, neutral background free of shadow. The photographs meet these criteria. You assign them the accession number as their file name, with a suffix for each view: 2024, 715, 1 for the main face, 2024, 715-2 for the left side, and so on. You upload them to the collection management system and link them to the object record. The image files are stored in 3 places: on the network server in the registration office, on the off-site backup server, and on an archival quality external hard drive that is stored in a fireproof cabinet. Digital preservation requires redundancy. A photograph stored in one place is a photograph that can be lost. A photograph stored in 3 places, including at least one off-site, is a photograph that is unlikely to be lost. The museum has lost photographs before, from an earlier era before systematic backup practices, and the experience informs current policy in the way that all institutional experience informs current policy, which is to say, with a certain quiet seriousness that does not require discussion, because everyone already understands it. You finish photographing the first picture. You update the cataloging record with the photograph references. The record is now substantially complete pending the research section. You set the picture aside carefully on the examined side of the documentation table. It has been measured, described, condition assessed, and photographed. It is no longer a 32 object backlog. It is a cataloged object in the permanent collection of a museum that will care for it for the foreseeable future, which at a well-run institution means indefinitely, and at a museum in financial difficulty means something more nuanced that you do not need to think about today. You bring the second object to the table. The second object in today's group is a covered sugar bowl from the same collection, same approximate period, same transfer print technique, different pattern. It has a lid. The lid is present and fits properly. This is notable because lids are the most commonly separated component of lidded vessels in museum collections. A sugar bowl with its original lid is a more complete object than one without. You note this, while the physical documentation proceeds in the same manner as the picture. This object requires additional attention in the provenance section of its record. Provenance is the documented history of an object's ownership and location from its creation to the present. A complete provenance record is: the object was made by this maker in this place, in this year. It was sold to this person. It passed to this family. It was purchased by this collector in this year, and it was donated to this museum in this year. Few objects have complete provenance. Most have partial provenance. Some have almost none. You record what is known and note what is not. Provenance matters for several reasons. It matters aesthetically. An object with a documented history connected to significant people or events has a richer story than one without. It matters legally. An object without provenance cannot always be confirmed as legitimately owned, because some objects in the art and antiquities market have been illegally excavated, stolen, or illegally exported from their countries of origin. Museums have an ethical, and in many cases, legal obligation to conduct due diligence on the provenance of objects they acquire, to ensure that they are not inadvertently acquiring looted or trafficked cultural property. The 1970 UNESCO Convention on the Means of Prohibiting and Preventing the Illicit Import, Export, and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property established 1970 as a benchmark date. Objects that can be shown to have been in a known collection before 1970 are generally considered to have a legitimate provenance. Objects that cannot be documented before 1970 require more scrutiny. The Sugar Bowl's donor records show it was purchased at auction in 1962. The auction catalog is referenced in the donation paperwork. The auction catalog, which you have a photocopy of in the accession file, lists the object with a brief description that matches this object and gives a previous owner as a private estate. Before the estate, the provenance is undocumented. The object dates to circa 1850. There are approximately 110 years between its manufacture and the 1962 auction, for which there is no documented record of where it was. This is not unusual for American decorative arts of this period. 110 years is a long time, and many objects of modest commercial value passed through multiple households without being formally documented at each step. A sugar bowl that sat on a kitchen shelf from 1850 to 1890, then passed to a daughter, then to a granddaughter, then appeared at an estate sale in 1940, and then was purchased by a collector in 1962, would leave almost no paper trail. This is the reality of provenance research for the vast majority of objects in regional museum collections. The sugar bowl is American decorative earthenware, manufactured and sold domestically, and there are no flags in the provenance file to suggest any concern about its acquisition history. You note the provenance as documented in the record. Auction 1962. Previous owner estate of name redacted per donor privacy policy. Earlier history unknown. You note the reference to the auction catalog in the bibliography field. This is the honest and complete provenance record for this object. It is what it is. Some objects have more complicated provenance histories. The museum's collection includes, for example, a group of objects acquired in the early 20th century that originated in contexts that would not be considered ethical by contemporary standards. objects purchased from dealers who obtained them through colonial-era excavations, objects whose export from their countries of origin may have been legally questionable at the time, and is certainly questionable by current standards. Objects collected by private individuals in circumstances that did not involve meaningful consent from the communities in which they were found. These objects are in the collection. Their provenance is documented as accurately as available records allow. Their status is reviewed periodically by the museum's collections ethics committee. This is the ongoing work of an institution that takes its ethical responsibilities seriously. It is not comfortable work. You do it anyway, because the alternative is not to do it, and not doing it does not resolve the underlying questions. You complete the provenance section for the sugar bowl. You move on. At noon, you pause cataloging and eat lunch at your desk, which is a thing you do most days and intend to stop doing eventually. While eating, you conduct the research portion of the documentation for the picture you cataloged this morning. Research means identifying the object more specifically than the physical examination alone allows. Using reference works, databases, comparative collections, and published scholarship. For the picture with the Beauties of America backstamp, the research questions are: which specific American pottery produced this pattern? Which specific scene is depicted on the picture? And can the date range be narrowed? You begin with the standard references for American transfer printed earthenware. The field has several indispensable reference works: Transferware Patterns and Sources by Petra Williams, the database maintained by the Transferware Collectors Club, and the records of the Liverpool Museums, which hold significant collections of transfer print copper plates and can sometimes identify decorative patterns by their engraving source. You search the Transferware Collectors Club database for the pattern name Beauties of America. The database returns multiple entries. The Beauties of America series was produced by several potteries, most prominently Enoch Wood and Sons of Burslem, England, who produced a large series of American views for the export market in the 1820s and 1830s. However, the backstamp on your picture does not match the Enoch Wood mark. Yours has an eagle, which is more typically American in character. You cross-reference the eagle mark description against American pottery mark references. The mark style is consistent with several mid-Atlantic American potteries active in the 1840s and 1850s. You identify the scene on the picture through the database. The bridge, the river, and the structure in the background are consistent with a documented view of the Passaic Falls in New Jersey, a subject depicted in several American transfer print series of the mid-19th century. You compare the decorative details on your picture against the database photograph of the confirmed Passaic Falls pattern. The bridge design matches. The river treatment matches. The structure is a mill. It was always a mill. the attribution holds. You update the object title, picture, Beauties of America, pattern, Passaic Falls scene, American, circa 1840, 1860. You add the research references to the bibliography field in the object record. Bibliography in a collection management system is not a list of books the curator has read. It is a specific list of published references that directly pertain to this object or to objects sufficiently similar to support the cataloging attributions. Each bibliographic entry follows a standard citation format. You enter the Transferware Collectors Club database reference with the specific record number. You enter the Williams reference with the relevant page number. You note that the eagle mark has not been definitively attributed to a specific manufacturer, and that further research using American pottery mark archives may be productive. You flag the record for follow-up research. The flag is a field in the collection management system that marks a record as requiring further attention of a specified type. You can flag a record for further research, for conservation review, for photography retake, for location verification, or for any other reason. The flag does not resolve the issue. It ensures the issue is not forgotten. You are a person who uses the flag field consistently and checks the flag report regularly. Not everyone does. You note this without judgment. Everyone has different workflows. Yours includes the flag field. After lunch, you return to the ceramics documentation table and continue with the remaining objects. The afternoon passes in a rhythm of examination, measurement, description photography, and record entry that is not monotonous in the way that repetitive tasks without skill or attention can be monotonous, but is instead rhythmic in the way that skilled, attentive, repetitive work becomes rhythmic. Each object presents its own specific configuration of characteristics, and the work of attending to those characteristics is interesting in the particular and consistent in the general. By 3:30 in the afternoon, you have processed 8 additional objects from the ceramics acquisition, bringing your total to 22 of the 32. 10 remain. You will finish them tomorrow and the day after. You note your progress in the project tracking spreadsheet that sits alongside the collection management system. Because the collection management system tracks objects individually and does not easily generate a progress report for a group of objects being processed together, and you need to know where you are in the project. The spreadsheet fills this gap. You have a number of spreadsheets that fill gaps in the collection management system. This is the reality of working with institutional software. Between the cataloging sessions, you spend time in storage room 3 for the inventory work. Before describing the inventory itself, we should discuss storage, because the storage environment is the primary tool through which the museum cares for its collection. And the decisions made about storage are among the most consequential decisions in collections management. The collection's storage areas of a museum are not simply warehouses. They are environmentally controlled spaces designed to slow the rate at which objects deteriorate. All objects deteriorate over time. This is not a problem that can be solved. It is a rate that can be slowed. The storage environment is the primary means of slowing it. The two most important environmental parameters are temperature and relative humidity. Temperature affects the rate of chemical reactions in materials. Higher temperatures accelerate deterioration. Lower temperatures slow it. The relationship is roughly quantified by the Arrhenius equation, which describes the temperature dependence of reaction rates, and which predicts that, for many materials, a 10-degree Celsius decrease in temperature will approximately double the time it takes for deterioration to reach a given level. Cold storage is therefore not merely comfortable for objects. It is a meaningful extension of their lifespan. Your general storage rooms are maintained at 63 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Some institutions maintain colder storage for specific collection types. Archives and photograph collections are particularly well served by cold storage. Relative humidity is the amount of water vapor in the air expressed as a percentage of the maximum amount the air could hold at that temperature. Most organic materials, meaning materials derived from living organisms, including wood, textiles, leather, paper, ivory, bone, and natural adhesives, absorb and release moisture from the surrounding air. When relative humidity rises, these materials absorb moisture and swell. When it falls, they release moisture and shrink. Repeated cycles of swelling and shrinking cause cracking, warping, delamination, and joint failure. Stable relative humidity is therefore more important than any specific humidity level within the acceptable range, because stability prevents the cycling. Your storage rooms are maintained at 45 to 55% relative humidity, with minimal fluctuation. The climate control system monitors and adjusts continuously. The daily log you fill out each morning is one of the ways a human eye confirms that the system is working. Light is the third major environmental concern. Light causes photochemical deterioration, the breaking of chemical bonds in materials by the energy of light photons. Ultraviolet light is the most damaging component, but visible light also causes deterioration in sensitive materials. Dyes fade, paper yellows. Organic materials degrade photochemically at rates that depend on the intensity and spectral composition of the light and the total exposure over time. The solution in storage is simple. The lights are off. Storage rooms are dark when no one is working in them. Objects in storage are not on display. They have no need of light. Darkness is their preferred condition, and it is the most effective preservation strategy for light-sensitive materials. Objects in storage are housed in materials that do not themselves damage the objects they contain. The term for materials that are safe for contact with objects is archival quality or conservation quality. Archival materials are chemically stable, meaning they do not off-gas harmful chemicals, do not have acidic pH values that would transfer acidity to the objects they contact, and do not attract or harbor pests. Common archival storage materials include acid-free corrugated board boxes, archival tissue paper, polyethylene foam in specific densities, polypropylene or polyethylene bags and envelopes, and cotton batting and muslin for padding and wrapping. Objects are not stored in contact with each other. Every object that could be damaged by contact with another object is individually housed, wrapped, padded, or otherwise separated from its neighbors. Ceramics are wrapped in archival tissue and stored in padded trays or boxes. Textiles are rolled on archival tubes or folded with tissue padding at fold lines. Metal objects are housed in materials that do not promote corrosion. Natural history specimens are housed in sealed containers with controlled atmosphere where appropriate. Glass is padded, separated, and stored with particular attention to stability, because broken glass is both a loss and a hazard. Each storage decision is made with reference to the specific material properties of the object and the specific risks of the storage situation. The shelving in storage room 3 is mobile shelving, also called compact shelving or high-density shelving. Rows of shelving, units mounted on tracks, which can be moved laterally to open an aisle between any two rows, allowing access to any object, while minimizing the floor space used by the shelving system. A room of mobile shelving holds significantly more objects than a room of fixed shelving, with permanent aisles between each row. Museums use mobile shelving because collection storage space is limited and expensive, and mobile shelving is an efficient use of both. You move the shelving by turning the large wheel at the end of each unit, which engages the gear mechanism and rolls the unit smoothly along its track. The mechanism requires some force to initiate movement, but is otherwise easy to operate. You have done this many thousands of times. It has not become interesting. It has become automatic, which is a different thing. You enter storage room 3 with a tablet loaded with the inventory checklist. The inventory checklist is generated from the collection management system. A list of all objects whose location record shows them as being in storage room 3, sorted by their physical location within the room. The location record for each object specifies the room, the shelving unit, the shelf level, and sometimes the specific position on the shelf. You will walk through the room systematically, unit by unit, shelf by shelf, and verify that each object listed for that location is actually there. Inventory sounds simple. It is not simple. It is methodical, which is related to simple, but is not the same thing. Methodical work requires sustained attention and consistent procedure. It does not require creativity or inspiration. It requires that you look at each location carefully, compare what is there to what should be there, and record what you find. If what you find matches what should be there, you check a box. If it does not, you investigate. You begin with shelving unit A1, the first unit in the first aisle of storage, room 3. The shelving unit has 8 shelf levels, each approximately 18 inches high, containing padded trays of ceramics from the archaeological collection. Each tray is labeled with the accession numbers of the objects it contains. You read the tray label. You compare it to the inventory list. You look inside the tray and confirm that the objects are present. The first tray contains 3 ceramic shards from a local archaeological site. Accession numbers 1987. For 1 through 1987. For 3, the inventory list shows 3 objects at this location. The tray contains 3 objects. You confirm each accession number against each object's marking. The numbers match. You check the box for each object. You note the condition as stable with no visible changes from the previous inventory record. You move to the next tray. The rhythm of inventory is red location, red tray, compare tray to list, confirm numbers, note condition, check box, move to next location. You work through this rhythm steadily. The work is interrupted by 2 kinds of events. A discrepancy, where what is in the tray does not match what the list says should be there, and an unexpected finding, where an object is in an unexpected condition that requires documentation outside of the routine inventory process. The first discrepancy appears at Unit A3, Shelf Level 4. The inventory list shows a ceramic vessel, a complete globular jar, accession number 1991. 12-7 at this location. The tray at this location contains a ceramic vessel, but it is not the jar. It is a ceramic bowl, accession number 1991. 12-9. The bowl is not listed as being at this location. The jar is not present. You do not panic. You note the discrepancy on the inventory checklist. Expected 1991. 12-7. Found 1991. 12-9. You search the adjacent trays. In the tray to the right, at Unit A3 Shelf Level 4 Position 2, you find the jar. Accession number 1991. 12-7, present and in good condition, in a tray labeled for a different object. The objects have been transposed. Each is in the other's location. This happens. Objects are moved for photography, for exhibition loans, for conservation review, and are sometimes returned to a location slightly different from their original position, or to the wrong position by a well-intentioned but slightly imprecise individual. The objects themselves are fine. Their location records are incorrect. You correct both location records in the collection management system. You note the correction in the inventory log. The second kind of event, an unexpected condition finding, occurs at Unit B2, Shelf Level 3. You open a tray containing a group of ceramic figurines from a donation made in 2003 and find that one of them, accession number 2003, 814, has a fragment that was not present in the last condition report. It is a small fragment, a hand, and a portion of a forearm from a small figurine, approximately 3 centimeters long, lying loose in the tray next to the figurine from which it has broken. The break appears to be along an old repair that has failed. There is a thin brownish adhesive residue on both the figurine and the fragment at the break point, consistent with an old repair using an animal-based adhesive such as hide glue or fish glue that has finally let go. The fragment is not lost. It is present in the tray, recoverable. The break is new since the last inventory, which was 18 months ago. You photograph the figurine and the fragment in situ, in the tray as found, before moving anything. You photograph the break point on the figurine and the break surface of the fragment. You place the fragment in a small archival envelope and label it with the accession number and the notation broken fragment, found date, inventory your initials. You place the envelope in the tray with the figurine. You update the condition record. Condition changed from good to fair. Break of previously repaired arm noted. Fragment present and housed with object. You flag the record for conservation review. A conservator will assess whether the fragment can be re-adhered and what adhesive and technique are appropriate for the repair. This is not your decision. You have done your part, which is to find it, document it, and bring it to the attention of the people whose part is to decide what happens next. You continue the inventory. The rhythm resumes. Most objects are where they should be. Most condition records are unchanged. Most trays contain what they say they contain. This is the correct outcome. The inventory is working as intended when most of what it finds is that things are as they should be. The discrepancies and unexpected findings are important, but they are exceptional. The normal case is order, confirmed and documented. By the end of your time in storage room 3 today, you have inventoried 412 of the 3,200 objects in the room. You have found 2 location discrepancies, both resolved, and 1 condition change requiring conservation review. You update the inventory progress record, 14% complete. You will return to this room on subsequent days until the full inventory is done. You return to the registration office and open the stack of condition reports prepared by the collections intern for the outgoing loan review. The loan is for a group of 12 objects from the decorative arts collection being borrowed by a partnering museum for an exhibition on regional craft traditions. The borrowing institution has requested condition reports for each object as part of the loan agreement process. A condition report prepared for a loan has a specific purpose and a specific audience. It will be reviewed by the conservator and registrar at the borrowing institution to determine whether the objects are in suitable condition for travel and display, and it will serve as the baseline against which the condition of the objects is assessed when they are returned. If an object has a new scratch or a broken element when it comes back, the condition report documents that the scratch or break was not present when it left. This is why condition reports for loans are important and why they must be accurate, complete, and professionally phrased. You open the first condition report. It is for a carved wooden box, accession number 2009. 6. 3 American mid-19th century walnut with a carved decorative panel on the lid depicting a floral design. The intern has completed the standard condition report form, which has fields for object identification, overall condition rating, description of condition by component, description of previous repairs or treatments, recommendation for loan suitability, and the preparator's or curator's signature. You read through the report. The intern has rated the object as good condition. The component descriptions are lid, good condition, carving crisp and complete, surface with old wax finish, minor abrasion to surface finish on right front corner, body, good condition, all joints tight, minor scratches to surface consistent with age, hardware, good condition, brass hinges present and functional, hasp present. The intern has noted one previous treatment, surface cleaning and wax application, treatment record on file, date approximately 1998. You assess the report. The condition rating is appropriate. The description of the lid abrasion is accurate but slightly vague. The term minor abrasion should include the approximate size of the affected area to be useful as a comparative baseline. You note this in the margin. The description of the hardware is correct, but should note the condition of the hinge pins, which are a common failure point in 19th century box hardware, and which, if loose, could cause the lid to become detached in transit. You retrieve the box from the loan staging area and examine the hinges. The hinge pins are tight. You add this observation to the report. The recommendation for loan suitability is appropriate. The intern has noted that the object is suitable for loan with standard packing precautions. You read through the remaining 11 reports at the same level of attention. 7. Require only minor additions or corrections of the kind you made to the first. 2. Require more substantial revision. 1. Because the intern rated an object as excellent when the presence of a repaired crack at the rim means good, is more accurate. And 1. Because the intern omitted the condition of a secondary element, a detached base, that is housed separately and is part of the loan. You meet briefly with the intern to discuss the corrections. The meeting is professional and specific. You explain why the condition rating of the cracked and repaired object should be good rather than excellent. Excellent means no significant damage or repair, and a repaired crack is by definition a repair. The repair does not diminish the object or make it unsuitable for loan. It is simply an accurate description of its condition, which is what a condition report is for. The intern understands. They revise the reports. You sign the revised reports. Your signature means that you, a professional with curatorial authority for this collection, have reviewed and approved these condition reports as accurate and suitable for the purpose of the loan. This is not a formality. It is accountability. If an object is returned from the loan with damage, and the borrowing institution claims the damage was pre-existing and visible in the condition report, and the condition report you signed does not describe that damage, the signed condition report is evidence that the damage is new. Your signature on that report means you will be the person who explains how the damage was missed. You are careful. You are always careful. The reports are accurate while you are completing the loan documentation. A colleague stops by the registration office to ask about the status of a potential deaccession review for a group of objects in the Natural History Collection. You are not the lead curator for natural history, but the question prompts a brief conversation about deaccessioning that is worth following at some length, because it is one of the more complex and ethically significant aspects of museum collections management. Deaccessioning is the process of formally removing an object from a museum's permanent collection. The word is the opposite of accessioning, which is the process of adding an object to the collection. Deaccessioning is not disposal. The decision to deaccession an object is separate from the decision of what to do with the object afterward. An object can be deaccessioned and then sold, donated to another institution, returned to its community of origin, destroyed if it is a hazardous material, or transferred to a different category of institutional use, such as educational handling collections. Each of these outcomes has different implications and is governed by different ethical standards. Museums deaccession objects for several reasons. An object may be outside the scope of the collection. A museum that focuses on regional history may have received a donation that includes objects from unrelated geographical areas, which would be more appropriately held by an institution with a different focus. An object may be a duplicate. If the collection holds 5 examples of a specific type of object, and only one is needed to document that type, the others may be candidates for deaccession. An object may be in such poor condition that it cannot be meaningfully preserved or exhibited. An object may have been found to have a problematic provenance that makes its continued institutional holding ethically untenable. Or an object may simply be outside the collecting scope and direction of the institution, as that scope evolves over time. The proceeds from the sale of deaccessioned objects are one of the more contentious issues in museum ethics. The position of the major professional organizations in the field, including the American Alliance of Museums and the Association of Art Museum Directors, is that the proceeds from the sale of deaccessioned objects may only be used for the direct care of the collection. Acquiring new objects, conserving existing objects, or improving collection storage. They may not be used for general operating expenses, for construction, for salaries, or for any purpose other than collections care. This restriction exists because the alternative creates a deeply problematic incentive. If a museum can sell its collection to fund its operations, then objects held in the public trust become assets to be liquidated whenever the institution faces financial pressure. The collection becomes a bank account. The objects in it become fungible. This is not what a museum is for. Some institutions, particularly during periods of financial difficulty, have sold deaccessioned objects to fund operations and have faced significant professional and public criticism as a result. These debates are ongoing in the museum field and are not resolved. You have opinions about them. You express them in appropriate professional contexts, which does not include a conversation in the registration office on a Tuesday afternoon with a colleague who asked a logistical question. You answer the logistical question. The deaccession review is in process. The paperwork will be complete by the end of the month. The colleague thanks you and leaves. You return to the condition reports. After completing the condition report review, you turn your attention to the loan agreement documents for the outgoing loan. A loan agreement is a legal contract between the lending institution, your museum, and the borrowing institution, specifying the terms under which the objects are loaned. You are not a lawyer. The loan agreement is reviewed by the museum's legal counsel before it is executed. But you are the person who prepares the curatorial portions of the agreement and verifies that all conditions are appropriate for the objects involved. The standard terms of an outgoing loan agreement cover the identity of the objects being loaned specified by accession, number the purpose of the loan, typically an identified exhibition, the duration of the loan with specific start and end dates, the exhibition venues and dates. If the borrowing exhibition is traveling to multiple locations, the credit line, which is the text that will appear on exhibit labels, and in the catalog attributing the object to your institution, the insurance, which must be provided by the borrowing institution at a value approved by your institution, the packing and transportation requirements specifying how the objects must be packed and by whom, and what couriering requirements apply the environmental conditions required at the borrowing venue, the installation and handling restrictions, and the return provisions. The credit line is a small detail that is not small to the institutions involved. It is the text on the label in the borrowing museum's gallery that says where the object comes from. The standard format is collection of institution name, city. Some institutions have specific credit line language they require, specifying the name of a donor whose gift funded the acquisition. If the object was donated by the Smith Family Foundation, the credit line may read, Gift of the Smith Family Foundation, collection of institution name, city. The donor's name in the credit line is often a condition of the original gift and must be honored in all public presentations of the object. You verify the required credit line for each of the 12 loaned objects against the acquisition records. 3 of them have donor credit line requirements. You note the required language for each and include it in the loan agreement. The insurance valuation is a number you are responsible for recommending, though the final determination requires approval from the museum director and sometimes from the board. The insurance valuation for a loan is not the same as the museum's internal valuation of the object for its own balance sheet. It is the fair market value of the object at the time of the loan, which represents what it would cost to replace the object if it were lost or destroyed while in the care of the borrowing institution. Determining fair market value for unique historic objects requires research into comparable auction results, dealer prices, and appraisal standards. For the 12 objects in this loan, valuations were established during the most recent institutional appraisal cycle 3 years ago. You review them and note that 2 objects in the group have sold comparable examples at auction since the last appraisal, suggesting the current valuations may be conservative. You flag both for a valuation update before the loan agreement is finalized. The environmental requirements section of the loan agreement specifies the temperature and relative humidity range that must be maintained in the gallery where the loaned objects will be displayed. You specify temperature 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, relative humidity 45 to 55%, maximum fluctuation of 5% relative humidity in any 24-hour period. For light-sensitive objects in the loan, you specify maximum light levels in lux and 0 ultraviolet light. The borrowing institution's facilities manager will review these requirements and confirm they can be met. If they cannot be met, you will discuss whether the loan should proceed or whether specific objects should be withdrawn. Loan agreements exist to protect the objects. Environmental requirements are one of the primary protections. The courier requirement is for one object in the loan, a large framed textile that is particularly fragile and whose installation requires professional handling under curatorial supervision. A courier is a staff member from the lending institution who travels with the object and supervises its installation at the borrowing venue. Couriering adds cost to a loan borne by the borrowing institution and is not required for all objects, but for objects that are fragile, irreplaceable, or technically complex in their installation. The lending institution's requirement that a courier accompany the object is standard practice and is expected by experienced borrowing institutions. You will be the courier for this object. The travel will take place in 2 months. You note it in your calendar. Near the end of the day, while you are completing data entry for the objects cataloged this afternoon, you take a moment to reflect on the collection management system, because it is the infrastructure through which all of today's work flows, and it deserves some attention. Collection management systems, abbreviated CMS in the field, are specialized database software designed specifically for the management of museum collections. They are distinct from general-purpose database software because they are built around the specific data structures of museum objects. The accession number hierarchy, the relationship between objects and their components, the relationship between objects and their associated records, such as photographs, condition reports, and exhibition histories, and the controlled vocabularies used in cataloging. Your museum's CMS contains a record for each of the approximately 47,000 objects in the collection, plus records for donors, exhibitions, publications, loans, acquisitions, and conservation treatments. These records are linked to each other in ways that allow complex queries. A search for all objects donated by a specific donor, or all objects that appeared in a specific exhibition, or all objects from a specific date range that have not had a condition assessment in the past 5 years, or all objects in a specific storage room that are flagged for conservation review. These queries support management decisions, exhibition planning, conservation priority setting, and donor relations. The database is not merely a catalog. It is an operational tool. Data quality in the CMS is a persistent concern. The database has been in use in various versions and predecessor systems for 30 years. Records created 30 years ago by different staff members using different standards, different terminology, and different levels of completeness coexist in the same database with records created yesterday using current standards and controlled vocabulary. The inconsistency is not a failure of any individual. It is the accumulated effect of institutional time and staff turnover on a data collection that is never finished and is never uniformly current. Managing data quality means identifying the inconsistencies, prioritizing which ones to address, and systematically improving the records over time. It is one of the less visible but most consequential aspects of collections management. You have a multi-year data remediation plan. It is on track, mostly. The CMS is also the system through which the museum manages its relationship with the objects physically. When an object moves from storage to the conservation lab, a location update is entered in the CMS when it returns to storage. Another update When it goes out on loan, the loan record is created and linked to the object record, and the location is updated to reflect the borrowing institution. When it comes back, the location is updated again. At any point in time, the location field in each object's record should accurately reflect where that object is in the physical world. The inventory is how you verify this. The inventory is why the location records are trustworthy. You also maintain in the CMS what your institution calls the Object Authority File. The Object Authority File is the record of each donor, each maker, each exhibition, each publication that appears in the collection records. When a new donor gives objects to the museum, a donor record is created in the authority file with the donor's name, contact information, and the history of their gifts. Each object donated by that donor is linked to the donor record. If the donor's name changes, or if they give additional objects in subsequent years, the authority record is updated, and the links automatically update all related object records. This is the value of a relational database. Changing one linked record updates all the records that depend on it, without requiring individual edits to each of the hundreds or thousands of objects that might be linked to a single donor or maker. You finish your data entry for the day. You run a daily backup of the CMS data to the network server. The backup runs automatically on a schedule, but you also run it manually at the end of your work session as a habit. The cost of losing a day's data entry is a day's work. The cost of running a backup is 15 seconds. You run the backup. We should take a moment to discuss the broader scope of collections documentation beyond the decorative art ceramics you have been working with today. Because a general museum collection contains many types of objects, and each type has its own specific documentation conventions, housing requirements, and professional standards. Natural history collections, for example, are documented using systems and standards that diverge in important ways from the standards used for art and decorative objects. A natural history specimen, a bird skin, a geological sample, a pressed herbarium, sheet, a pinned insect, a marine invertebrate in fluid preservation, is documented with information that has no equivalent in decorative arts cataloging. The collector's name and field notes, the precise geographical collection location in decimal degree coordinates, if possible the date of collection, the ecosystem type, the sex and age of the specimen, if determinable, and the preparation method used to stabilize it for long-term storage. The catalog number for a natural history specimen is also structured differently from an art accession number. Natural history collections often use a collector number, assigned by the person who collected the specimen in the field, which may predate the object's arrival at the museum by years or decades. The collector number identifies the specimen within the collector's own system and is linked to the collector's field notes, which provide the ecological and geographical context that gives the specimen its scientific value. A bird skin without a collection location and date is far less scientifically valuable than one with complete field data. The data and the specimen are inseparable. You document both. Archaeological collections have their own documentation conventions, rooted in the discipline of archaeology itself. An archaeological object is documented in relation to its context. The excavation site, the stratigraphy of the deposit from which it was recovered, its precise spatial coordinates within the site, the associated objects and materials found with it, and the interpretation of the deposit in which it was found. An archaeological ceramic shard is not simply a broken piece of pottery. It is evidence of human activity at a specific place and time, and its meaning derives entirely from its context. A shard removed from its context without documentation loses most of its scientific value, which is why looting, the removal of archaeological objects without controlled excavation and documentation, is a significant harm to the archaeological record and not merely a property crime. Archival and library collections held by museums have their own documentation standards derived from the archival and library professions. Finding aids, which are the descriptive documents that allow researchers to identify and access archival collections, follow standards developed by the Society of American Archivists, including the describing archives. A content standard, known as DACS Rare Book, and manuscript cataloging follows standards from the library field. When a museum holds both three-dimensional objects and associated archival materials, which many regional and historical society museums do, the documentation systems for the two types of material must be managed in parallel and linked appropriately. Photographic collections require knowledge of photographic processes and their specific preservation needs, because different photographic processes have different chemical compositions and different rates of deterioration under different conditions. A daguerreotype, which is an image on a polished silver surface, requires very different storage from a glass plate negative, which requires very different storage from a modern color print. The documentation of a photographic collection includes identifying the photographic process, which requires visual examination under magnification, and sometimes chemical analysis, as well as recording the standard descriptive information about the image content, the photographer, and the date. Your museum holds all of these collection types. You are primarily responsible for the decorative arts collection, but you work alongside colleagues who specialize in natural history, archaeology, archives, and photographs. The documentation standards of each discipline inform and occasionally complicate each other, and the CMS must accommodate all of them within a single data structure. This is one of the persistent challenges of managing a general collection. You address it pragmatically. You know your area well. You know enough about the other areas to collaborate effectively, and you ask colleagues when you do not know. This is the correct approach to working in an interdisciplinary institution. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you begin the end-of-day procedures that close out your work session in the collections. You return all objects that were removed from storage for today's cataloging to their designated locations. The 22 ceramics that have been documented today are returned to the temporary holding area, where they will remain until all 32 have been cataloged, at which point they will be assigned permanent storage locations and moved to storage. Objects that are mid-process are not moved to permanent storage, because moving them twice is 2 opportunities for a location record to be incorrect, and you prefer to move them once. You verify that all objects removed from storage, room 3, during the inventory, are back in their locations. The transposed objects have been correctly replaced and their location records corrected. The figurine with the broken arm is in its tray with the fragment envelope. You verify this by opening the tray and looking. You do not assume. You look. You turn off the lights in the documentation area. You verify that the environmental controls are operating. The temperature and humidity readings on the wall unit in the collections corridor show 64 degrees Fahrenheit and 47% relative humidity, both within range. You note the end-of-day reading in the environmental log. You lock storage room 3. You lock the collections area door. You return to the registration office and save and close the collection management system records you worked on today. You log out of the system. You print the condition reports signed today and file them in the object files. Paper copies of condition reports are maintained alongside the digital records because institutions that have experienced data loss know that paper, stored in stable conditions, is a remarkably durable backup medium. You check your task list for tomorrow. The ceramics cataloging. 10 objects remain. The inventory. You will return to storage room 3 and continue from unit B3 where you left off today. The condition report for the figurine with the broken arm needs a formal update and a conservation referral memo. You have a meeting at 2 p.m. with the exhibition designer about the upcoming fall exhibition installation, at which the placement of several objects from the collection will be finalized. These placements will require temporary location record updates in the CMS to show the objects as being in the gallery rather than in storage. You update your calendar. You gather your personal items. You reflect briefly without dwelling on it, on the fact that you have today contributed to the permanent record of 47,000 objects that will be cared for by this institution for generations after you have left it, and that the records you created and updated today will outlast you and will serve curators who are not yet born, providing them with the information they need to care for objects that are already centuries old and will be centuries older still by the time those future curators need to find them. This is not a small thing. It is also not something you think about often during the workday, because you are usually thinking about accession numbers and relative humidity, and whether the loan agreement needs another revision. You turn off the light in the registration office. You leave through the staff entrance. The museum closes to the public at 5:30. A few visitors are still making their way through the galleries as you pass the staff corridor entrance, visible through the small window in the door. A family with 2 children, one of whom is pressing their nose against the case of a locally excavated ceramic assemblage and being gently redirected by a parent. The ceramic assemblage has been in that case for 11 years. Its records are in the CMS. Its condition was last assessed 2 years ago. Good, no changes. The child's nose is not a conservation concern at this distance and angle. You go home. You have completed a day of museum collections, documentation, and inventory. During this day, you cataloged 8 new objects from the ceramics acquisition, bringing the group to 22 of 32 documented. You completed the physical description, condition assessment, photography, and preliminary record entry for each. You conducted provenance research for 1 object and updated its record with the findings. You inventoried 412 objects in storage room 3. You found 2 location discrepancies and corrected both. You found 1 previously undocumented condition change and documented it, flagging it for conservation review. You reviewed 12 loan condition reports, requested revisions to 2 of them, and signed all 12 after final review. You contributed to the loan agreement preparation for an outgoing exhibition loan. You updated 23 object records in the collection management system. You ran the daily backup. The objects you worked with today are, in the aggregate, extremely old. The ceramics from the donor estate date to approximately 160 to 180 years ago. The archaeological ceramics in storage, room 3, date to several centuries before European contact in this region, meaning some of them are between 500 and several thousand years old. The figurine with the broken arm is Victorian. The documents in the archival collection go back to the early 19th century. These objects were here before you. They will be here after you. Your job is to ensure that the record of what they are, where they are, and what condition they are in is as accurate and complete as possible, so that whoever cares for them next has the information they need. This is not a glamorous job in the way that popular culture sometimes imagines museum work to be glamorous. There are no adventure sequences. Nothing is booby-trapped. The most dramatic thing that happened today was a broken Victorian figurine arm, and the response to that was to photograph it, put it in an envelope, and write a note in a database. This is the correct response. This is what caring for objects looks like when it is done well. Quietly, methodically, thoroughly, and without particular drama, in a temperature-controlled room where the lights are usually off. The objects do not need drama. They have already had whatever drama they were going to have. The pitcher was used, probably hundreds of times, to pour water or cider or some other liquid at a table where people sat and talked and did not know they were handling something that would end up in a museum. The ceramic shards from the archaeological site were part of a vessel used by people who could not have imagined this institution or this process. The figurine was someone's decorative object, possibly beloved, possibly not. Now in a padded tray in a locked room with a number written on its base. Your job is to write accurate things about old objects in a database, to take photographs with scale bars, to keep the humidity at 45 to 55%, to check that the lights are off, and to make sure that when someone a century from now needs to know where the Passaic Falls pitcher is and what condition it is in, they can find out. Good night. The collection will be here tomorrow. So will you.